Okay, so the first one we're going to do is that inseam pocket. So you'll have 3 pattern pieces for this. We've got a front skirt and a back skirt. So this is just like half of a skirt. This would be center front here. So this is the waistline. This is the side seam that would go on your hip. And then this is just a shortened version of it. So it's much shorter than what a normal skirt pattern would look like. But this is the front, and then this is the back. And same sort of situation here. This would be center back, waistline, hip, and then this would be our shortened hem. And we're going to connect those 2 so that we have one side seam, and we're going to put a little pocket in that. This, I've corrected the version that is on Blackboard for you. This one right now is all in black, but the one that you will print off is all in blue. So you know that needs to get cut out of your lining fabric. And you'll need to cut 2 of those so that you have a front and a back to your pocket. Okay. If this was a full garment, we would actually cut 4 of those so that we have 2 for either side, 2 for the left, 2 for the right. But for this sample, we'll just cut enough for one side. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm going to take my front skirt first. And I've got my 2 little notches slit into the side. Those little notches show us where our pocket opening will be. So that's where your hand would go in, right on that opening. So I've got those 2 little notches cut. I'm going to take one of my lining pieces, lay it right sides together with my skirt front, and I'm going to match up those notches because you'll see this piece has those little notches as well. So we need to match those up on the edge. Let's see, where's mine at? There it is. And then we're going to pin those together. Right there. And then we're going to do the same for the back. And what we're going to do on both of these is we're going to stitch in between those 2 notches. So not all the way to the edge of the fabric, but just in between those notches, we'll stitch it at 1/2 inch in just a minute. So let's go ahead and grab my back skirt. And I'm going to do the same thing. Lay this one, my other pocket piece, right sides together with the back skirt. Match up those notches. See where they went. There they are. And then just pin in the middle, matching up your raw edge of your fabric. Okay, so both of these we're going to take to our machine and stitch right in between those notches at 1/2 inch. Okay, so just like I said, we're going to go in between those 2 notches. So not all the way to the edge of the fabric, just to that notch. And we're going to stitch these together at 1/2 inch. My thread has not been cutting properly lately. Okay, so there's one of them stitched in between those 2 notches. I'm going to do the same for the other. Okay, now we're going to take these over to our ironing board. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is trim up our threads. Please mute yourself if you are not asking a question so the camera doesn't bounce back and forth. Okay, and then we're going to flip both of these out away from the seam and press right on that seam line. So I'm leaving it flat like this, and then I'm just going to flip it out so it's sticking off the hip, and I'm going to press that seam right here. And again, make sure that your iron temperature is not too high so that you don't melt your lining. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take these back to the machine, and right next to that seam, we're going to do an edge stitch just to hold this pocket pressed to that side that we just pressed it. So let's go do an edge stitch right next to that seam. So right there, put my needle down right next to that seam. And again, for this one, I'm just going in between the two notches. Okay, so there's my edge stitch for that one. Let's do the same for the other. And there's my edge stitch for the second one. Okay, let's go back to our ironing board again. Okay, we're going to trim that up one more time. So trim any threads you have hanging off. And now we're ready to put these two together. So I'm going to lay both of those right sides together when I do so. So I've got print side here and then print side on this one, I'm going to face down. So now when I do that, my skirt pieces should match up at this hip and those pocket pieces should match up. So we're going to match it up right there at that hip, that side seam, starting at the waist. I'm going to match it right at that notch. Try and pin that together. There we go. And then I'm going to do same thing below the pocket area. There we go. Okay, and now I'm going to throw one more pin in here. Okay, and now we're going to match up that actual pocket bag. So match up the raw edges of your lining pieces. Okay, and now what we're about to do is we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch down our side seam, until we get to that notch. And then we're going to pivot and go around our entire bag over to this other notch, and then we'll pivot and go down the rest of the side seam. So we're essentially, excuse me, skipping that opening because we're going to go out to the bag where that opening is. So let's take it to the machine and get that part done. Okay. So starting up at the waistline, this will all be at 1/2 inch. So I'm going to start right at that 1/2 inch mark. Stitch until I get down to my notch, which is right where we started that other stitching. So we should go right up to it. And then I'm going to leave my needle down in the fabric so I can lift up and pivot. And I'm going to pivot until my lining fabric is even with the edge of my foot. And now I can follow that and stitch 1/2 inch around the bag. And then once we get to that other notch, I'm going to pivot and then work my way down the rest of the side seam. Okay, let's head back to our ironing board again. Okay, so trim up your threads. And then the next thing we're going to do is open up our skirt. And now at this point, you should have a side seam right here with a pocket opening in between those two notch areas. So the last thing we need to do is just bust open the below and above portion. So what I'm going to do is snip through my side seams right at the edge of my lining fabric. And I'll hold this up for you to see a little bit closer. So right at the edge of the lining fabric, I just snipped through both of my seam allowances. And now I can open this up and I can bust open that top portion and that bottom portion that go above and below my pocket. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do is press that opening area. So from the front, I'm going to let my pocket pieces go towards the skirt front. And right at that edge, I'm going to put it to where on both sides of the opening, I'm going to put it to where that seam is right on the edge. And I'm going to press it. So I'm going to do it with it open so I can press one at a time. So this front area, I'm pressing, and then that back area, it'll just lay flat open. So pockets should be going towards the skirt front, which was the one that had the notches over here on the right-hand side. So this is my front. So I put both of my pocket pieces towards my front, made sure that right at that front pocket opening that the seam was right on the edge of the opening. And then the back one, it'll just lay flat. That way both of them face towards the front. And then you can just fold it right there on the seam and that would be like half of your skirt. Okay. So this is the end of that particular sample. If this was on a full garment, we would just need to serge that pocket bag just like we did on our pants. But we'll go ahead and leave it like this for the sample.